And good morning. It is Thursday morning. And, well, there were some developments yesterday. So, hopefully several of you watched, I know several of you watched the show yesterday and got my kind of take on the dangerous legal precedent that is set by the impeachment of Donald Trump. That being that in the future, assuming that the conviction actually goes through, given that McConnell has refused to initiate an emergency session or special session of Congress to go forward with the conviction phase of the impeachment process, it would set the precedent that a private citizen, Donald Trump, because as soon as the inauguration is over, Donald Trump is a private citizen, legally indistinguishable from you and I. He will forever be President Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, the same way we refer to, the mistake that was Obama, or the mistake that was Bush, or the mistake that was Clinton, or the mistake that was Bush before him, as president forever. Well, okay, president forever. That's a little Kim Jong-un is president forever. So it's a little different. But legally, Donald Trump will only be a private citizen once the inauguration passes. And the dangerous precedent set there is that it would mean that in the future, if you have another Trump-like candidate, which is to say a candidate who is running for the first time in politics ever, running for president, or even if you could even be talking about a candidate running who has never held another previous public office and is running for senator or House rep, could be impeached as a private citizen by the Congress and thereby barred from office. So part of what we're talking about this morning is the cheapening of the impeachment process. To be very clear, even if this impeachment goes nowhere, which is the most likely case, the fact of the matter is that the Democrats have impeached Donald Trump a second time means that in the future, the idea of impeachment, the tool of impeachment, which should be an important part of the authority of the government to remove a dangerous person who has somehow gotten into office, is cheapened because the Democrats have shown clearly that it is a mere political tool. It is not a legitimate legal process. It requires no evidence. It requires no compelling arguments. And so the fact of the matter is that going forward, one can be impeached literally for the sole offense of being the opposition party. Not of being offensive, not of being dangerous, not of committing crimes, right? In the first impeachment, the Democrats didn't even allege any crimes. They alleged activities and assigned motives and listed actions that they called crimes, which were not crimes. So the standard of high crimes and misdemeanors has been completely divorced from the idea of impeachment. And so to impeach someone no longer has a legal basis. It is purely a partisan political tool. And one of the chief reasons that the Democrats have chosen to pursue a second impeachment of Donald Trump is precisely so that in the history books, their dangerous propaganda machines that we call the public education system can point to Donald Trump and say Donald Trump was the worst president ever, and you can tell because he was impeached twice. When the fact of the matter is that indication should be almost counterindicative, given that the impeachment itself is such an obviously partisan tool without legal merit. How's that for an opening monologue?
Not bad. And a couple of things. One, can I see the chat, please, buddy?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, so just a couple of quick thoughts on that. The first one is, any Republican that signs on to this is not just being a weak Republican. They are creating a long-term problem for Republicanism, conservatism, libertarianism, any of these right-wing isms that generally focus on more freedom, more personal responsibility, less government interference, lower taxes, blah, blah, blah. because you can't argue with the results that Donald Trump got. I've said privately to you and on this show that if in 2016, let's say Ted Cruz or Rand Paul had become the nominee and then had become president, and we'd had an identical presidency, we would be telling everybody, see, this is why you vote for conservative principles. You like the fact that there's not any new wars happening in the world. You like the fact that the economy is going gangbusters. You like the fact that North Korea is literally sitting down at the table with South Korea. You like the fact that there are literal Mideast peace process deals happening. Well, that's why you vote for our side, buddy. If you want higher taxes and, you want people to be worried about the injustices of who's allowed to use which bathroom, you vote for them. But if you want actually to have a job and a good job and your job to do so well that they either have to give you a raise or allow you to work overtime because there's so much work that needs to be completed by your job, you vote for us. So any Republican that flips on this is not just flipping on Donald Trump. They are flipping on core principles. And please believe, you talk about those propaganda machines. There's a really important reason why they want to refer to the president as a failure. They don't want to just refer to Donald Trump as a failure. I'd say, just if I'm just kind of bearing everything in mind, okay, I'd say Donald Trump governed 70-30, 80-20, somewhere in that range with regard to conservative principles, which is part of why so much of his presidency was a success. And so the indictment won't just be against the man, it'll be against the philosophy. And then the second thing that I want to bring up is like the impeachment process is so cheap. Like, had the inauguration ever even finished before Maxine Waters was going, impeach 45, impeach 45, impeach 45? Like,
I think maybe the inauguration had finished before Maxine started screaming, but there were in fact calls for impeachment from those before the impeachment or before the inauguration occurred. They started telling us immediately that they were going to impeach Donald Trump, and then the first articles of impeachment were drafted 17 minutes after. Were drafted and published 17 minutes after the election occurred, or the inauguration occurred. So yeah, that was basically instantaneous.
And to be clear, like, it looks an awful lot like Uncle Joe has dementia. And as we pointed out before, it's not early onset when it happens when you're almost 80. That's just normal things that happen to old people sometimes. It just is. So there's a legitimate reason for that. But the left and the mass media, but I repeat myself, would all collectively shit bricks. It's, how dare you treat this old man this way, and deal with it. It's funny, and I know other people have made this point, so please let me add myself to the chorus. Russia was trying to interfere with our elections, right? Russian interference. So does that mean Putin wanted Joe Biden, and there needs to be like a 3-year investigation into how Russia helped Joe Biden become president? Or do the Russians only help Republicans? They don't ever help Democrats. Is that the standard?
Sometimes the Russians help Democrats. Let's not forget, Tulsi was a Russian asset.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, go figure. She's actually in policy. She's one of the further left Congress people, too. But because she's not a bitch who wishes to destroy her political opponents, no, she won't do. Like, she's all on board with single payer, okay, and has actually got the charm and the speaking ability to maybe sway some of those people in the middle over to her side. But no, they don't want her because she doesn't have this animus toward the right. She's willing to go on Sean Hannity's show and have a polite disagreement with him. Can't have that. And then finally, and I'll shut up. This is the last thing, and this more than anything else with regard to the propaganda of the public education system. Serious question. What all do we know about Richard Nixon? We know he left office in disgrace. That's what we know. And then there are little tiny things that have kind of permeated our pop culture. There's an expression, only Nixon can go to China. But does anybody even know what happened there? And I realize some people know. But the point is, all we remember about Richard Nixon is that he said, "I'm not a crook," and then ended up leaving office a few weeks later. So same thing with Donald Trump. I mean, forget that amazing economy, forget these Mideast peace deals, forget the fact that for a time, North and South Korea were discussing reunification. Now, forget all that. No. What are we going to remember about Donald Trump? That he was such a loser that he got impeached twice. That's what we're going to remember about Donald Trump. Now, it's not what you and I are going to remember. We're going to remember somewhere around the 6-month point after he'd been in office, despite having Paul Ryan's feckless bullshit Congress not help him out an inch. The economy started to take off like a rocket. And then suddenly Obama got to take credit for that. Okay, everything that went wrong during the 8 years of Obama was Bush's fault. But when things started to go right under Trump, now that's Obama, all right? So if, and big fucking if here.
And you didn't hear Obama coming out to say anything about how the economy was actually still the remnants of the Obama economy when the pandemic hit. And one of the big problems we ran into is that the American emergency stockpile for dealing with the pandemics had been almost completely depleted by Obama and never replenished. Right? Obama's the guy that smokes his last cigarette when you get to the job site and then bums for the rest of the day. And America's the one guy that remembered to start a full pack in the morning. And so by the end of the day, it's time to clock out. And you're watching that frickin' clock because Obama smoked your last cigarette right after lunch. And you didn't tell him to go fuck himself because you're a nice guy. And part of the reason you're a nice guy is because you usually don't run into problems like that because you think ahead and you don't fail by being a goddamn communist.
Let me be clear. Everything that bad happened is somebody else's fault, and everything good that happened is my fault.
Yeah.
But no, and look, we even have people that we know and respect that think maybe the impeachment's a good idea, that for better or worse, even though it's not Donald Trump's fault, he's now become an anchor. He's become a millstone. And the sooner he can be jettisoned, the better.
Yeah, okay, so let me button up on that real quick. This idea that Donald Trump incited violence, that Donald Trump bears responsibility, right? This idea that Donald Trump is responsible for the events of January 6th, and that the events for which he is responsible were criminal, or that he's responsible for the criminal events. If I go ahead and concede that, I want you to think back to the baseball game shooter and how everybody, even us on this show, jumped up in defense of Bernie Sanders and said, look, just because Bernie's got one nut job that tried to murder literally every current Republican member of Congress does not mean that Bernie is responsible for that because his rhetoric has been violent and intolerant. But if this is the standard, If Donald Trump gives a speech and says, I want peaceful protest, which he literally did, I want you to protest peacefully. Contrast that with years of the Democrats saying, you get out, you get in their face, you cause a scene, and you make them know that they're not welcome here. If you see them eating in a restaurant, you go in and harass them and attack them and make them know that they're not welcome in that restaurant.
Oh,
right?
Maxine Waters' greatest hits.
Yeah. Sanders has been similar with his rhetoric, much more violent than Trump has ever been. If the standard to remove someone from office is that you spoke and your speech incited violence without your ever having actually said, go and use violence, go and do rioting, right? We need more unrest in the streets, like Kamala said. If your speech does not even have to include the actual calls for violence to qualify as incitement to violence, then I said go ahead and impeach Trump and everyone else who meets that standard and put every single one of them in prison until we can execute them for the crime of sedition, treason, and insurrection. Because the standard that you're espousing absolutely indicts and convicts every sitting Democrat, with the possible exception of Tulsi Gabbard.
Yep. Anyhow, buddy, we're coming up on it for me. You know my situation. Folks, I'm still working a lot. And believe it or not, the day will come where we're actually going to have a few shows where we discuss why Cameron works so very much. But not yet.
In fairness, I think Zaluska the Slav's the only one in the chat that's not totally tracking on that.
It's different for the people in the chat to know.
Yeah, it's quite another thing for the other several dozen people that watch the video after we go off the air. All right, so y'all be safe out there, and your
things ahead of time.
Your big takeaway here. Your big takeaway here. This impeachment is just another big honk honk from Clown World. The enemy is at the gates, and their objective is nothing short of your elimination from public speech. The objective of the Democrat Party is a North Korea-style one-party system with controlled opposition that exists for the exclusive purpose of continuing to pretend like we can use the word democratic to describe our system. There's a joke going around in Europe now, and I'll close with this. In Europe, especially Poland and the like, there's a joke going around that America has spent so much time exporting democracy to the rest of the world that they forgot to keep any for themselves. When you hear them talk about what the rest of the world thinks of Donald Trump, that's what the rest of the world thinks about America right now. That we have exported so much democracy to the rest of the world that we ran the fuck out. So, y'all take that and enjoy that little joke. And we will see you tomorrow.